Let's recap The Walking Dead, Season 5, Episode 4, Self-Help. And so this episode is right after the one with Beth, and this doesn't involve Beth, but it's right after that. And so we get to see what's going on with the people on the bus that are headed to Washington. So, bad news, bus catches on fire after it topples over and crashes. And they have to actually scrappily fight off some walkers. Eugene is not a fighter. He's, a smart guy, and he, does what he wants, and he says really kind of intelligent things, but also very socially awkward things. And so he clearly can't fend for himself, and his only, attribute is his aptitude. And so he does a pretty good job with Tara's assistance in fighting off walkers. But then, Abraham's like, no, we gotta move on. So this entire episode is an Abraham flashback episode where we see him in a kind of a safe haven where he previously was, obviously, in Texas, and it seems to be that he had a family, or at least some people that he cared about, with a woman and 2 small children. However, we saw him, beating up a guy viciously, crushing his skull, and blood's everywhere, and there's blood all over his hands, and he's a really angry guy. And so when he goes back to his family, or the people, they're terrified of him, and they're shocked that he's got blood all over his hands. That they leave him a note saying, don't try to find us in the morning. And this is kind of an explanation as to why he's such a tough, closed-off, driven by the mission kind of guy. And we see that throughout the episode because his left hand is bloody the entire episode, and so that always kind of reminds us of where he's coming from. And so he actually has a relationship with Rosita, who bandages up his hand, and they have sex, I guess. It's a common thing now, sure. And so Rosita's kind of at first, oh no, I'll go along with whatever you say. But at the very end, he's like, no, we can drive through this field of walkers. We can totally go through. We can't go back. We're not going back. We need to save the world. And he actually starts getting kind of violent with it. He grabs Eugene and pulls him forward. And it's at this point that Rosita's like, no, we're not doing that. This is unsafe. But the big thing is that Maggie has a talk with Eugene, and there's a whole thing about Samson and the power of his hair, because he has a weird haircut, which is kind of symbolic of him and his character. And so Eugene kind of starts to get a little sentimental, and we get a little more in-depth thing of his character when he talks to Tara also. A lot of people are talking to Eugene this episode. He kind of hints at the fact that he's kind of useless, and he wants to be in with people who are good and can protect him. And they make a point to say, you're part of our group now, we're family, we protect each other. And so multiple characters are saying this, so it's kind of a theme throughout the episode. Well, as it's been through the entire show, duh. It's actually pretty smart, because they find this fire truck. And when they're attacked by walkers, he hoses them all down. It's really crazy. It's a really great scene when Maggie's stabbing them in the head with the knife, and then Eugene's just spraying them with a power hose, and they just kind of collapse under the heavy and the push and the pressure of the water. It's pretty cool. Very, very end, when Abraham kind of pushes him and he's getting really violent, Eugene finally lets out the secret that he's not a real scientist. He just made the whole thing up to gain protection on the way to Washington because he thinks that Washington is a safe place, and he was just going to get there and get the other people there, and it was going to be great. But it's become this huge thing now, and it's been Abraham's mission, and he's given speeches on saving the world and being that hero and fixing things and turning things around and ending this horrible nightmare. And so when the truth comes out that we don't actually have an answer, it's pretty devastating. And he punches him in the face. Oh man, he was bloody. But everybody kind of, they're not okay with Eugene, but they kind of side with him, meaning they don't want Abraham to beat the crap out of him. So next week we're going to see what happens with Beth, because she's in the hospital and she's trapped there by Dawn and the other doctor who is killing the other doctors so that he's being protected, which is a real parallel to Eugene. He wants to stay unique, and so the people who have the power can protect him and keep him alive. So Beth's dealing with that drama in her failed escape attempt, And so then she sees Carol come in on a stretcher, and so we're going to find out what Carol and Daryl have been up to and where that connects with Beth.